Hi there. The goal of this tutorial is to go through floating licenses, and in particular the use case where you need to support floating licenses offline. Let's first start with a recap on what floating licenses are. Normally, if you want to restrict a license to a set of machines, you can either use the node-locked approach or floating licenses. So with node locking, if you, let's say, limit the license to 2 machines, if you want to activate a third machine on that license, you'll have to deactivate one of the 2 machines that are currently activated. The floating license approach, you instead add a requirement that only a specific number of machines can use the license simultaneously, but you don't need to do the manual activation and deactivation. You're only looking at the number of devices using it at the same time. So for example, you could have a use case where your customer has installed your application on 100 machines, and then only 10 developers, for example, can use that license at the same time. And if you anticipate that they will change devices very frequently, then this is a much better approach than using node-locked licenses, because it's a bit of a hassle to having to activate and deactivate the machines each time that one of the customers has to change to a different machine. So the normal use case, if we look at the code here, essentially the way it works is that each time your application is running, in the background, it has to send heartbeats to the API, and that way the Cryptolens knows that that application is, or that machine is active. And whenever it stops sending those heartbeats, it will automatically deactivate it. And the way to do it is very similar to what you've seen in the key verification tutorial. We're calling key.activate, product ID, access token, everything is the same. And the only thing that we've added is the floating time interval. And this is you can think of this as the expiration time so within that period of time, you have to send a new key.activate request for that machine to be considered active. And if that doesn't happen, then another machine can use that seat instead. So let's see how this works. I compile the project, and then if everything works as expected, we see the license key. That's correct. So we've been able to activate it. And let's quickly go to the dashboard and look at the number of devices, and you can see we've already activated here. So here I've hard-coded the machine code, but in production, you would use a different method that actually correctly identifies the machine that they're running on. So let's now focus on the offline case, because as you can see, for this approach to work, so with node-locked licenses, you can both have the online use case, but you can also run them offline, because you can provide your customers with a activation file where that machine is included, and then it will work. The question is now, what do we do with floating licenses? Because as we've seen, for floating licenses to be considered active, it has to continuously send requests to the API or to Cryptolens. So how do we do the offline scenario? And I'll show it to you. If you go to the license server repository, it's here. So the goal is, instead of having to send requests to Cryptolens, what you can do is you can send requests to a local license server. And that's the solution to the problem for floating licenses that have to be in an offline environment. So this would be the floating, this would be the license server that your customers would have on their network, and there could either be a link to Cryptolens, or this can be a completely isolated environment. And now for this tutorial, we're assuming that there is no link to the outside world. So this is a completely locked-in environment with no access to the internet. So to get this working, if you scroll all the way down to the floating licenses offline section, and then essentially it's actually just to follow all the steps, and I will guide you step by step on what has to be done. So first, we go to this page. We can keep the defaults, but let's make sure that we have the offline mode enabled and the local floating license server is also enabled. Let's click on this button here, generate configuration. And that's done. Let's go back to the tutorial again. So let's do the first step. So as we can see, we have the new RSA public key here. And what's important to mention is that this is going to be different from the one that you used when you activated with Cryptolens API, or the cloud API. So if you want to send the request to the license server instead, we would have to change this to the RSA public key that's shown on this page. This is different. And then we also have the configuration string, which I will copy. And let's go back here. Step 3. So there are different ways of supplying this configuration string to the license server. You can have it as an environment variable. You can supply it as a command line parameter. So there are a few ways. I think the easiest way is probably to do the command line approach, which I'm going to show you in a bit. But first, let's see where you can download it. So to download it, you can go to the release section, and then you click on the latest release, and then you download the zip file that's provided there. I've already done it, and I think for this tutorial we can use the .NET 6 4.6.1 version. So I've already have the license server here. So let's go down again to the floating license section. Where do we have it? Right, so we have the configuration string. Let's see if there's anything else we need to do. In the release folder, create a new folder called license files. I've already done that. So in the same folder as the license server.exe, and or if you're using the .NET Core version, I think it'll be a .dll. You put the license files folder, and this is where we're going to store the license file. And so I think we have everything. So what has to be done next is that we have to go to the dashboard and then click on download activation file. And then copy it and put it in the license file folder. And let's copy the path here. And now let us start the license server. And I think I forgot one step. We need to go back. It's important to start PowerShell as administrator. Otherwise, it's not going to work. And then config. And then we copy the configuration string. Okay, this is most important part. So it has loaded the activation file. That's good. So it's from the activation file that will determine how many devices that can use the license simultaneously. So now we have the license server up and running. Now this is the one way of running it. If you want, you can also run it as a Windows servers if you run this on Windows. So let's go back to the code. We've already changed the RSA public key. The only thing left here is to provide the license server URL. It's not HTTPS, it's just HTTP. I think we have the address here. Good. Now let's see if we've done everything right. License key, machine code, floating time interval, and then the address to the license server. Again, if everything works out as it should, we should get the license key back. And we can also see in the log that that license has been returned successfully and activated. So this is actually we've covered everything for the use case for floating licenses offline. So to support floating licenses, there are two ways, just to recap on what we've discussed today. Either you call Cryptolens API directly, or if you need to support floating licenses in an offline environment, you'd have to install or send your customers the license server executable, and they can run it completely in an offline environment without having to contact Cryptolens API. And this can be particularly useful, for example, also if you're working with, if your application is going to run in a Docker container. And the reason for it is because usually it's hard to identify them uniquely. And one way of bypass or solving that is to generate a random identifier and keep it on at runtime. And as you can see, the node-locked approach will not work because it's just going to be too many deactivations happening, and floating license. And instead, it's better to just say, okay, how many number of concurrent instances can run at the same time, but you don't really maybe care as much which identifier they have. You're only concerned about the number of simultaneous instances. So that was it. If you have any questions, please let us know. Thank you.